intersection of science and literature.
We're here in most significant literary and cultural icons on Cannery Row and beyond Cannery Row and beyond Monterey. This was the home and laboratory of Edward F. Ricketts, who was a friend, confidant, and mentor of John Steinbeck, the author. Here you have primarily a fiction writer, and a famous fiction writer at that, who is friends, very close friends, with a marine biologist, a scientist. This is a place that inspired Steinbeck in many of his ideas and his writing, and it also inspired the output of Ed Ricketts. Ed Ricketts produced Between Pacific Tides, which is the classic book on the intertidal, with something that was rather novel at the time, an ecological viewpoint about the environment and organisms. And he applied that to the environment and people, and that's also affected how Steinbeck worked.
Cannery Row was once a bustling boomtown of canneries, lining the rocky shore. The diverse community there inspired Steinbeck. He wrote the classics Cannery Row and Sweet Thursday. Its characters and locations were based on real people and places. What do you think Doc's lab is based on? Or the character Doc? After publication, the street, the lab, Steinbeck and Ricketts became instantly famous.
There's something magical about this place. This is the living legacy, the living link to the tide pole that was called Cannery Row. The reader is joining John Steinbeck and looking out at this window at the life going on. And it's basically the hours after the canneries have closed. But Steinbeck reflects this group of folks that lived here, the denizens of the tide pole called Cannery Row, the after hours folks.
At the lab, visitors can view laboratory equipment once owned by Ricketts. The back patio contains holding tanks that once held specimens.
One of the main attractions were the tanks in the back. And he created a extra garage door in the back so he could drive through with specimens and unload those specimens in the tanks out back. Now those specimen tanks were created by Vicente Rodriguez to press sardines. He had a sardine pressing operation here, and this had been a house, and behind it had the sardine press. But I know Ricketts, that was a primary magnet for his marine biological work. Down below is his actual laboratory where he worked on specimens, filling orders, marine biological specimen orders for universities, museums, and high schools around the world. There's collections in Sweden, there's collections in New York, various museums and schools still have his specimens. This also has another story, an important story, and this is a group that named itself after the lab, the Pacific Biological Lab group. And this was a group of fellows from many walks of life. Some of them were artists and cartoonists and other fields. And several of them had a great interest in jazz. So they gathered here, and this is really the birthplace of the idea for the Monterey Jazz Festival, an international jazz festival right here in Monterey. If you look at the poster of the first jazz festival, 1958, you're going to see some of the leading jazz artists reflected there. So Louis Armstrong was here. Look at these people: Miles Davis, Dizzy Gillespie, Duke Ellington.
The Monterey Jazz Festival has become the world's longest-running jazz festival. It has just celebrated its 56th event, and it consistently attracts the world's best musicians.
The city purpose is to preserve and interpret this wonderful, historic, and cultural resource here on the Row. And when you walk in here, you can feel a time and a place. You can feel and sense when Ricketts lived here, and those conversations with Steinbeck and various artists they knew. But then there's the lab group, and I think you can almost hear the jazz music being played.